Do you not see your Lord casts the shade? If he had willed, he could have made it stand still, but we made the sun its pilot. Then we draw it back to us little by little, and he is the one who made the night a cloak for you, with sleep as rest, and made the day a release. And he is the one who sends the winds with good news ahead of his mercy, and from the sky we send down cleansing water. Then we give life with it to a land that was dead, and we quench the thirst of our creatures, livestock, and a multitude of peoples. We have repeated this among people many times for them to take heed, but most people insist on denial. And if we wanted to, we could have sent to every town a warner. So do not give in to the faithless, stand up to them with everything you have. And he is the one who mingled the two seas, one sweet and fresh, and the other salty and bitter. And between them he put an insurmountable barrier. And he is the one who, from a fluid, created humanity and connected them by kinship and marriage. For your Lord, everything is possible. Yet they worship beside God things that can neither help them nor harm them, and against their Lord the faithless contend. But we only sent you to give good news and a warning. Say, I am charging you no fee for this. Let anyone who wishes to take a path to his Lord. And trust yourself to the living God who never dies, and bless his glory. He knows the sins of his servants well enough. The one who created the heavens and earth and all they contain in 6 days, then ascended the throne. The good Lord, how well is he aware.
In the previous weeks, we talked about a number of events, such as
the reversion of
Umar ibn
Khattab,
and before that we talked about
the
resettlement in Abyssinia. And before that we were talking about
the persecution of
the persecution. And we were talking about we talked about the negotiations and the requests and demands that Quraysh held with Abu Talib, and we read a series of demands and diplomatic resolutions that Quraysh attempted with Abu Talib, and all of them he kept on turning them down. What did they want to get from those diplomatic resolutions? What was their goal?
That the Prophet ﷺ would leave his preaching and
yes. Either they get him to stop, or they want to kill him. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And you read throughout the Quran that they would try to compromise with the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself. And you read that your warnings throughout the Quran. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala said, وَإِن كَادُوا لَيَفْتِنُونَكَ عَنِ الَّذِي أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ لِتَفْتَرِيَ عَلَيْنَا غَيْرَهُ وَإِذًا لَاتَّخَذُوكَ خَلِيلًا. And they came very near to tempting you away from the instructions we gave you to get you to make up something other than it. And if you had that, you would have been their best friend. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِذَنْ وَلَوْلَا أَن ثَبَّتْنَاكَ لَقَدْ كِدْتَ تَرْكَنُ إِلَيْهِمْ شَيْئًا قَلِيلًا. And if we hadn't given you strength, you would have leaned towards them a little bit. إِذَنْ لَأَذَقْنَاكَ ضِعْفَ الْحَيَاةِ وَضِعْفَ الْمَمَاتِ ثُمَّ لَا تَجِدُ لَكَ عَلَيْنَا نَصِيرًا. If you had, we would have tasted you, given you a double punishment in life and death, and you would have found no one to defend you against us. Their request was either from Abu Talib or the Prophet ﷺ to compromise, or if Abu Talib wasn't able to come to a compromise, they wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ. And we read that Abu Talib wouldn't have that. Apparently, from what historians say, that after Abu Talib refused all of their diplomatic solutions, they started openly discussing, actually taking action, carrying out the threats that they had made. When it came to that point, they say Abu Talib took his nephew, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his entourage, the people who were loyalists to him, and he made a blockade, a garrison in the hollow of Banu Hashem. And that's the hollow of Banu Hashem. It looks vastly different now because the masjid has grown out to the point where it's almost there. And that little house there,
is that in Makkah?
that's in Mecca.
Yeah, that's what.
That right there, right now, that's a library. But that is
Yeah, also.
apparently the house where the Prophet ﷺ lived. Not actually those same walls, but that place. And that's it from another angle. This right there, this is the courtyard of the masjid right now. And those are stairways leading into the masjid. And Safa and Marwa is right there. And that's it from another angle. That's that same building, but this was a mountain, and it's been demolished to make room for the masjid. Partially demolished. But that's the hollow that he's referring to, that we're referring to. The historians say that when the Prophet ﷺ and and Banu Hashem and who else?
Al-Muttalib.
Banu al-Muttalib went into that hollow. That's when the rest of the Muslims went to where?
Abyssinia.
Abyssinia. They didn't have an Abu Talib who was willing to protect them. And Abu Talib, as far as we know, it was a political thing. He wasn't going to protect some Muslim who was in another, who wasn't under his charge. That's not what it was about. But he wasn't going to let anyone bully him into giving up someone who was underneath his charge. So there was Banu Hashem and Banu. You can't reach it. Oh, she wants to get up to. Banu Hashem and Banu Muttalib were blockading themselves in that hollow, and that they made a fortress. The rest of the Muslims, whoever could, had left to Abyssinia, and they were out of the reach of Quraysh there. Najashi had refused to surrender them. He gave them asylum. Then, what happened? was something what we talked about last week.
Umar radiallahu anhu.
Omar converted, who was the head of a branch. Hamza converted, who was also in a position of leadership. And more people were converting, male and female in every branch of Quraysh. And that's just something you can hold on a second, sweet. If you look at the difference, when we talk about the first list he gave of early Muslims, and then the ones who are moved to Abyssinia, you can see the number of people who are converting day after day. And this is just, by the way, this is the list that Ibn Ishaq knew of. The list, whether it's the list of the earliest Muslims or the list of the ones who went to Abyssinia. In that story we talked about last week, about what?
Umar's conversion.
When Umar converted, part of that story, it's not translated, it wasn't translated there. When the people were mobbing him, he's quoted as saying, if there were 300 of us, we wouldn't be having this problem. Meaning that Adi was smaller than 300 households. And a household containing a number of men and women. Let's say 250 households, 200 households, with every household having a number of men and women. That means this is not the names that are here. That's not the entire. That's not the whole Banu Adi. It's not even a fraction of them. It's just specific names that are mentioned for a reason. And the same thing with the rest of these lists that we have. It's not the entire clan. It's just the names that are having to be known in history. Now, Quraysh, after all of these events kept on happening, they weren't able to use direct force. They made a decision to do something else. They made a decision to put an embargo or sanctions on Banu Hashem. They're locking themselves up in that hollow, and so we don't want to actually attack, but we'll starve them out. So they made an agreement to place sanctions on Banu Hashem and Banu al-Muttalib. And we'll read. Can you read that first hadith, Brother Tani? The top of the page there. This is in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim.
Usama bin Zayd said, I asked God's Messenger ﷺ, are you going to stay in your old rooms in Makkah during Hajj? He replied, well, has Aqil left us any rooms to stay in?
Yes. This quote here, when was it said?
After Hijrah?
Yes, after Hijrah. When?
At the time of Hajj.
During Hajj.
Hajj has happened every year since Ibrahim, as far as I know.
Was the last Hajj?
During the Hajjat al-Wada', the farewell Hajj. Osama ibn Zayd asked, what did he ask the Prophet ﷺ?
Are you going to stay in your old rooms in Makkah during Hajj?
What does that mean?
His home?
Yeah, that would
Yeah.
probably be that house that we pointed out to you in that picture. Are you going to stay in your own house? Are you going to Mecca, or are you going to stay in where you used to live? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Can you get the sister? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What did he say?
He said, has Aqil left us any rooms to stay in?
What does that mean?
That
Who
means
is
Aqil
Aqil?
has.
Brother of Ali.
Yes, you were
Yeah.
talked about this week. The brother of Ali, Aqil ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib. Yes. What does that mean? What the Prophet ﷺ said? Hmm?
He put his hands on their
Property.
Because the house is under Akil responsibility.
What happened was the Prophet ﷺ gave up his home, and so did. But all the Muslims didn't live in the home of the Prophet.
Ali ibn
ﷺ.
Talib.
So did Ali, the son of Abu Talib, one of the sons of Abu Talib. He gave up his home, and so did
Hamza.
Jaid.
he didn't live in the home of the Prophet ﷺ either.
his wives.
Jaid.
Yeah, but they're under the Prophet ﷺ. I'm talking about someone who would have. Rewind. Whose territory did the Prophet ﷺ live under?
Hashim.
Hashem. And who is Hashem under?
Um,
The one we're talking about now.
Abu Talib.
Abu Talib.
Yeah.
The Prophet ﷺ left his home and made hijrah.
Jafar.
So did Ja'far, and so did
Ali.
Ali. The ones who inherited after the death of Abu Talib, the ones who inherited Abu Talib were
Talib and Aqil.
Talib and
Aqil.
Aqil. Talib, as far as at the time that he's asking, Talib has passed away. And Talib, I don't think he ever accepted faith. Aqil did, and Aqil is still there. But Aqil, he's the one who assumed all of the property of Abu Talib.
Yeah.
And it didn't pass on to the Prophet ﷺ or anyone else, or to Ali or to Ja'far. It was passed on to Aqil. So the Prophet ﷺ said, Aqil hasn't left us any rooms. And the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يرث المسلم الكافر ولا الكافر المسلم. A Muslim doesn't inherit from a non-Muslim and vice versa. The Prophet ﷺ basically said, I don't have a house there anymore. And then he said,
we are setting up camp tomorrow in the mountain pass of Bani Kinana, where they made a pact to be faithless.
now, instead of staying there, we're going to camp out in a place called Khayf Bani Kinana, which is where they made this pact that we're talking about. And subhanAllah, they were sealed off in that hollow, in that home that he's talking about for all these years. They're not going to stay there. They're going to stay in the place where the people made that pact to cut them off in. And if that's what is that?
That's the hollow.
Yeah, that would be the hollow of Abu Talib.
Abu Talib.
And that building that's what they say is where the house of the Prophet ﷺ was. And that's from another angle. And that is the mountain pass of
Bani
Banu Kinana. And right there, that's a masjid they call Masjid al-Khayf. That's part of Mina, where people make Hajj, and the Jamarat are right before it, here. What's that right there? See the thing where
That's the Kaaba.
that's the Kaaba. And what's that line right there?
That's the side
Yes,
between Safa and Marwa.
Safa, that's Marwa, and this is Safa. And that's the house right there. That place, the mountain pass of Banu Hashem is over here. It's way over from Mecca. Those are the
Jamara.
Jamarat. And this is the beginning of Mina, right there. Can you read Brother Tanwir from the
Next.
edit for the words that the Prophet ﷺ said? They made a pact to be faithless. What is that faithlessness?
Not accepting the message and
That's not what they made that's not what they agreed on.
trying to kill the Prophet.
How is that faithlessness?
Faith includes belief in Allah and the Prophet being he being a prophet sent by Allah.
That wasn't the terms of the agreement.
And when they make their embargo.
Yeah. Where's the faithlessness? Well, let's read the terms of the agreement and then ask the question again. Can you read that paragraph that starts with "This led to Quraysh"?
When Quraysh's diplomatic overtures to Abu Talib refused.
No, down farther. This one. This led to Quraysh.
Okay. This led to Quraysh placing punitive sanctions on Banu Hashem and Banu al-Muttalib. They drew up a written contract in which all of Kinana vowed not to trade, intermarry, or even visit with those two branches.
What is Kinana?
The Quraysh, all the Quraysh.
Yeah, Quraysh is to Kinana as like Washington D.C. is to the United States. And Kinana is the mother tribe of Quraysh, but Quraysh is like the capital of Kinana. So it's not just these branches that we're talking about here. Actually, in Quraysh, these are the Quraysh. There is inner Quraysh and outer, and I think he talks about some of that in the introduction of that book. There's inner Quraysh and outer Quraysh. There's the Quraysh that lives inside Mecca, and those are those branches that we have here. And there's also Quraysh that lives outside. And they're Quraysh as well, but they're not from these particular branches. And then there's Kinana, which is a number of other branches that Quraysh is part of Kinana, and Quraysh is in charge of Kinana. So the head of Quraysh is also the head of Kinana. They made a pact not just with amongst themselves, but with the entire Kinana to starve out Banu Hashem. Yes, continue.
Every faction signed on, solemnly pledging that they would never compromise with Banu Hashem or feel sorry for them until they handed over God's messenger. They posted this agreement inside the Kaaba to solemnize it further.
Yes. What is that? That's what the Prophet ﷺ described as a pact to be faithless. Where's the faithlessness there?
To cut the relation.
Yes.
The relation.
To cut off their
Relation.
own family, to cut off their brothers, to starve out their brothers. And again, we make a point of this a lot. That's faithlessness, but that's not disbelief. There's no, they didn't make a pact to have a particular opinion or not to have a particular opinion. That's faithlessness. It's not disbelief. It's faithlessness to their blood, which is evil enough in and of itself. But why are they so angry? Why are they so angry with Banu Hashem?
Because they are not handing over Rasulullah's life.
Yes, why are they so angry? Why are they so upset?
Because many of the Quraysh, they are accepting the message that Prophet ﷺ has brought, and
Which means, which does it mean that they're like now threatening to kill them or to steal their money, or
they are leaving their.
I don't know if it even really affects their power. They're not threatening to a revolution or anything. They're not worshiping the gods that they're worshiping. That's what offends them so much, because they're refusing to acknowledge the gods that they venerate.
And in a broader context, if this news spreads around, the rest of the Arabs, they will follow, and means their status would reduce, because they would also.
Allahu A'lam. I really don't want to sympathize with them, and it's not.
Kind of like economic impact that in Hajj people used to come there, so with all their.
But it's you know, some of them fought, and then they apologized and were forgiven, and it didn't take away any of their prestige. So that's not really the case, and people rarely act like logically. You think if, say, there was an employee in a position in a company, and he had it was a position that was very important to the company. He was getting a huge salary because he had a degree from Harvard and Yale, and that employee was demanding a huge salary, and that employee would, because he had a degree from Harvard, he would complain about everything and come late to work and and just, you know, barely do anything. But he had a degree from Harvard, so everybody said, you know, okay, we need this position. Then let's say they decide, because everything's so difficult for him, we'll hire an assistant. That assistant maybe had a degree from a community college. The assistant comes in, doesn't complain about anything, gets all the work done, and doesn't demand a high salary. Now, it would be logical for the first person to say, yeah, shame on me. You know, I have a degree from Harvard, that's how I should act, and he get his act together. That would be logical, but do people always act like that?
No.
And even though a person acting bad in that situation, it's only going to make his condition worse. It's not going to. It's just going to make him look worse in the eyes of the company. But that's, people act like that. Now, yes.
The contract was drawn up by Mansur bin Ikrimah bin Amir bin Hashim bin Abd Manaf bin Abd bin Qusay.
This is Mansur ibn Ikrimah. This is from that would be, this is, these three names should be moved over here, and it would be Mansur ibn Ikrimah ibn Amr ibn Hashim. It would be him. That's the one he's saying. And also, Abd al-Dar, they have that long-standing beef with Al-Manaf, and they have personal issues there anyway. So it's understandable that he's the one writing it up. But you see that two branches of Al-Manaf, Nofal and Abd Shams, also they sided with their traditional rivals against Banu Hashem and Banu al-Muttalib. And some people say it was Nadr ibn al-Harith. Who was there. Continue.
When Quraysh did that, both Banu Hashem and Banu al-Muttalib rallied around Abu Talib bin Abdul Muttalib, and they dug in with him in his hollow, closing their ranks behind him. Most of them were just as much at odds with the Prophet ﷺ as the rest of the Quraysh was, but they did not take kindly to anyone bullying them into giving up one of their own.
Yes, and you see how the animosity of others towards Banu Hashem, it's personal, and the loyalty of some of Banu Hashem and Banu Muttalib, it's personal as well. It's not faith in what he was, the message that was sent to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in fact, in Hashem, for example, there is this man. What's that name?
Al-Harith.
His son. Can you see that name?
Abu Sufyan.
Abu Sufyan. Who's Abu Sufyan? No. Abu Sufyan ibn
Al-Harith.
al-Harith. Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith is not Abu Sufyan ibn Harb. Where is Abu Sufyan ibn Harb?
He's in
Yes.
Makhzum.
Hmm?
Makhzum.
No. Abd Shams.
Abd Shams.
Part of Abd Manaf. Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith, how was he related to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How was he related to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? They're cousins, first cousins. They say actually he looked just like him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Sufyan ibn Harith, who you assume is one of the ones going into the hollow and standing behind Abu Talib, was known for saying very offensive things about the Prophet ﷺ. And apparently things that were so personal and offensive that nobody has been willing to write them down. And they say in Arabic, وَهُمُ ذَوِي الْقُرْبَى أَشَدُّ مَضَادَةً عَلَى الْمَرْءِ مِنْ وَقْعِ الْحُسَامِ الْمُهَنَّدِ. That a close relative, when they want to get you, they know your weak spots, and they're worse than anyone else. And you read the seerah, there are a lot of things that were said by Quraysh, things that are blasphemous or things that are hard to repeat. And a lot of them, they were said in public, and people remembered them, and people wrote them down. But what he said, apparently nobody was willing to put that on, to repeat that, to put it on paper. But he's still standing behind Abu Talib, and he's not going to let himself be and his people be bullied into giving up someone who belongs to them. We'll see about him later, inshallah. As-salamu alaykum.
The soul.
We just traveled to do prayer. Where's women?
The sisters, it's one section, but if you want to pray together, you can pray any person, inshallah. Okay? And Mistah ibn Uthatha, that's the one Brother Ahmed and Brother Mu'adh were talking about. You remember?
Yes.
Yeah. When they were talking about the story of Aisha, Mistah. Continue, Brother.
The sole exception was Abu Lahab Abdul Uzza bin Abdul Muttalib. He defected from Banu Hashem and joined Quraysh, sticking up, so he claimed for Allah and Al-Uzza.
Yes. And did Allah and Al-Uzza stick up for him? Apparently not, because he's cursed by billions of babies and little children around the world to today.
Quraysh denied these two branches all access to the markets, and they did all they could to prevent anyone bearing food or amenities from reaching them. When Banu Hashem would go out of their hollow for the trade fairs, Quraysh would do all they could to buy up every product or inflate its price. Al-Walid bin al-Mughira had it announced throughout Quraysh, if you see anyone from Hashem trying to purchase food, outbid him and don't let him buy it. If you don't have cash on hand to bid with, charge it to my account. This state of affairs continued for 2 or 3 years, during which they suffered great deprivations. The only supplies that reached them were those smuggled to them by a few secret well-wishers in Quraysh.
Yes, and this is 2 or 3 years, and we don't know a lot about what happened, because it's not the type of thing that's observed in history. And wars are well documented in history, but it's the people silently starving. It's not. It's that people don't pay attention. It doesn't take people's. It doesn't capture people's attention. There's one incident that he mentions about a secret well-wisher within Quraysh. This is Hakim ibn Hizam. He talked about him before a number of times. Who is he?
The cousin of
No.
Khadija.
Not cousin.
Okay, wait. Uncle.
This is Khadija right there. The nephew. Ibn al-Akh.
Yeah.
Ibn Akhuha. He's the nephew of Khadija. And Hakim ibn Hizam is very
Rich.
but legendarily wealthy. He's the one that we said he bought the Dar al-Nadwa from Abd al-Dar. They say that Abu Jahl ibn Hisham once caught him trying to smuggle some wheat. He had one of his employees, he was trying to send him with some wheat to, who was he trying to send it to?
Aunt Khadija.
Khadija, his aunt, radiallahu anha. And he caught him and he said, you stay right there, I'm going to expose you to everyone in Mecca. There was another man who also we've read about before. Other man is part of Banu Asad as well, Who is he?
Abu al-Bakhtari bin Hashim.
Yes. This man. And make a note of him. He will come up. We've already noticed him before, and we'll notice him again, inshallah. He comes and defends Hakim ibn Hizam, and he says that's food that belongs to his aunt, and he's just trying to, send it back to her, to deliver her property to her. How are you going to stop him? And they got in a fight about that, and they said eventually they came to blows over it. And Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib was watching them, and there was something that they didn't want anybody in Banu Hashem to see, because they were afraid that they would gloat over them.
Is that Amr?
Who is that?
What is it? Is it the name?
Abu al-Bakhtari. Abu al-Bakhtari. Abu al-Bakhtari.
Bin Hisham.
This one, Abu al-Bakhtari, we mentioned him as part of those groups that negotiated with Abu Talib and addressed the Prophet ﷺ when they summoned him. But here, you see him acting in a different way, and this is it. Just maybe for political reasons, maybe just decency.